The morning sun hadn't yet burned through the hillshade fog when I spotted the fresh tire tracks. They carved deep grooves into the red clay that lined the old North Trail on my ranch. 500 acres of rugged, inherited land that had belonged to my family for 3 generations. And no one had any business driving on it. I stepped out of my workshop, wiping grease from my hands. The metallic scent of oil clung to my flannel shirt, but something in the air shifted wrong. The tracks led through the split-rail fence I'd repaired just last week. Someone had busted it again. From the porch, my 10-year-old son Mason waved at me, his smile bright under his straw hat. He was brushing Pepperjack, his beloved miniature horse, just like he did every morning. That little cream-colored pony. That was more than a pet. Mason was a quiet kid, the kind who rarely spoke unless it was to animals. After his mother left, Pepperjack had become his whole world. "Breakfast in 10, buddy," I called. He grinned and waved the horse's hoof like a handshake. I followed the tracks toward the western ridge. A rising unease crept up my spine. That section of land bordered the new HOA development. Hillshade Pines, a maze of identical beige homes with manicured lawns and drone-patrolled mailboxes. They'd popped up like a weed 5 years ago, with the HOA president, Karen, declaring herself queen of the neighborhood. Karen had tried roping me into her fiefdom for years. "Need to bring your property up to standard," she'd said once, eyeing my barn like it was a pile of garbage. "Our HOA's new boundaries place you in the extended green zone." I laughed then. "You see any beige siding out here, Karen?" She didn't, but it never stopped her from sending me glossy newsletters and friendly compliance notices. I tore up without reading. I crested the ridge just as the first gunshot cracked through the morning stillness. A bird scattered from the trees. My breath hitched, then a second shot. Then, a high-pitched whinny, a terrible sound. Guttural, panicked. "Final, Pepperjack," I whispered, and broke into a sprint. Branches slapped my face. Rocks cut into my boots as I tore downhill, crashing through the underbrush like a madman. I burst into a clearing and time stopped. Pepperjack lay on his side, legs twitching, cream hide streaked with blood. Mason knelt beside him, his small hands shaking as he pressed them against the wound. Tears streamed down his cheeks, mixing with the dirt a few yards away. 2 men in camo stood casually beside a lifted truck. One raised a rifle, still warm from the shot. I couldn't feel my hands anymore. "What the hell did you do?" I shouted, storming forward. The older man glanced up, chewing gum. "Oh, it was just a little horse. Thought it was a stray." Karen said this land was open for controlled hunting. My fists balled. "This is my ranch," I said, voice low and shaking. "Private, you're trespassing." The younger one shrugged. "Not what we were told." I looked back at Mason, still cradling the fading pony, his mouth quivering but silent, his eyes locked with mine, pleading, broken. I dialed the sheriff. But by the time the deputies rolled up, the hunters had their stories straight. Just a misunderstanding. No posted signs. The HOA president gave us clearance. Karen showed up 15 minutes later, lips pursed, eyes smug. "I never said they could hunt there," she lied smoothly to the deputy. "I only mentioned the shared conservation space between the HOA and bordering lands." "Shared," I snapped. "I've got 1943 deed maps that prove this land's been in my family since before your subdivision existed." Karen blinked slowly. "Maybe next time, you should post clearer signs." The deputy stepped between us. "Hands up, it's a civil matter. No charges unless you press for trespass, but without clear signage. It's a gray area." Mason didn't say a word on the drive back. That night, under a soft sunset, I buried Pepperjack beneath the cottonwood tree behind the barn. Mason placed his tiny saddle at the head of the grave, hands trembling. I'd seen many wrongs in my life, but never one that cut this deep. Karen had crossed a line. She didn't just trespass on my land, she trespassed on my family, and I wasn't about to let that go. Grief didn't leave our house. It settled into the walls like smoke. Mason barely spoke after Pepperjack died. He stopped going out to the barn. The saddle stayed untouched by the cottonwood tree, collecting dust and dew. I tried to keep the world moving. Fixed the broken gate, replaced the private property signs with large metal ones, posted every 100 feet. I even added trail cams, motion detectors, and a solar-powered perimeter alarm. I wasn't just mourning a horse, I was fortifying my land like a war bunker. Then Karen sent a letter. "Dear Mr. Holt, we regret the recent misunderstanding. However, continued hostility toward HOA members and obstruction of shared community access paths violates the Hillshade Pines expansion guidelines. Please remove the unauthorized signage and fencing by week's end, or fines will be assessed. Sincerely, Karen HOA President." I read the letter twice, then fed it to the fire pit. The shared path she referred to. A rough trail my grandfather built for cattle runs, which hadn't been used for anything but deer since the 80s. Had cut through my land, not hers, and it wasn't open to the public. But ever since the HOA laid down their new walking trail, Karen had convinced herself the path belonged to everyone. 2 days later, I caught HOA landscapers weed-whacking along my fence line like they were trimming a community park. I confronted them. They mumbled something about a beautification initiative and quickly packed up when I called the sheriff. Again, no arrests. Again, miscommunication. Karen wasn't coming at me head-in. She was probing, testing how far she could push. Then came the worst of it. I returned from a hardware run to find a backhoe at the west end of the property, idling near the old cattle path. The operator, a guy named Reggie in a neon vest, said he was there for trail grading, per HOA order. I parked my truck across the path, got out and stood in front of the machine. "You lay one finger on that dirt, I'll have you for trespass." He radioed someone. Karen showed up 10 minutes later in her pristine white Lexus, sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. She stepped out with a binder in her arms and a practiced smile. "Mr. Holt," she said, like we were old friends, "we're not trying to provoke you. This trail is important to the community. You're welcome to enjoy it too." I looked around. Do I look like I want a nature walk with dog poop and toddlers in strollers across my backyard? Her smile didn't budge. "We have documents from our land survey. It shows an easement right through here. This work is well within our rights." "There's no easement," I snapped. "Not on my deed. You want to see it?" She waved a hand. "Old deeds get overwritten. County lines change. You'd be surprised what falls under shared jurisdiction these days." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "You killed my son's horse." Her smile cracked. "Don't be dramatic. It was an accident. To you, to us, it was family." Her tone sharpened. "You're being unreasonable, Mr. Holt. This isn't just about one animal. This is about community progress." I stared at her perfect nails and smug posture, and realized she didn't just want power, she wanted control. Of the trail, of the land, of me. That was her game. Bureaucracy as a weapon. I said nothing more, just backed my truck further down the trail and parked sideways, completely blocking access. Reggie shut off the backhoe. Karen turned on her heel and stormed back to her car. The silence that followed was more dangerous than the confrontation that night. I found Mason sitting by Pepperjack's grave, holding an old photo of the two of them. "She didn't say sorry," he whispered. Double quotes. "No, she didn't," I said. "He didn't cry. He didn't ask why. He just looked up at me and said, 'Are you gonna stop her?'" I knelt beside him. "I'm going to make sure she never touches our land again." He nodded. Once that was all. And in that moment something inside me solidified. Grief had carved a hole in our lives, but now anger filled it like concrete. Karen thought she'd won because she had papers and titles, but I had blood in the soil, and a promise to keep. The war Karen wanted. She had it. But unlike her, I didn't posture. I planned. I spent the next week inside county records, cross-checking every map, survey, and deed I could get my hands on. I pored over land grants that went back 80 years. I visited the county assessor's office, scanned microfilm copies of grandfathered easements, water rights, and trail access disputes. Most people wouldn't bother with the fine print. I did what I found wasn't just good, it was ironclad. Karen's so-called shared trail wasn't hers. In fact, it sat entirely within a protected parcel deeded to my family in 1943 by 3 separate surveys and verified with the original land plat. And better yet, I uncovered something she definitely didn't expect. Her HOA's entire nature corridor expansion was based on a fraudulent map submitted by her own private contractor, one who, get this, wasn't even licensed in the county. I smiled for the first time in weeks. Then I went to work. I had my own surveyor state certified come out and mark the entire boundary with bright orange stakes. I filed formal property restriction documents with the county and had them notarized. I called in an environmental consultant who confirmed that Pepperjack's grave sat atop native wildflower growth, giving me grounds to declare the area a personal conservation memorial. Then came the masterstroke. C. There was a 2-acre plot within the HOA's boundaries, landlocked, neglected, and up for tax auction. A relic from before the Hillshade development that no one claimed. I bought it for $3,200. By the end of the week, I had cleared it out and moved in a prefab wooden barn painted red, just like Grandpa's old one. Hung a new wooden sign on the fence. Pepperjack's Meadow, miniature horse therapy center open to all. The zoning, agricultural commercial hybrid, the permits, already filed. I dotted every I, crossed every T, and left a copy of the paperwork with the Hillshade HOA board in a nice manila envelope. Karen's name was on the HOA President roster, so was her signature on the previous fraudulent expansion request. The moment she saw the therapy center sign, she snapped. She stormed into my meadow like she still owned something, eyes blazing. Her heels sank into the soft dirt, but she marched forward like a general. "This is unacceptable," she hissed. "This," I said, tipping my hat, "is legal. You can't just set up shop in the middle of our community." "You're right, you can't. I can. I own the land, and I followed every law. This is a residential neighborhood, zoned mixed-use. Agriculture was grandfathered in." Her mouth opened, but no words came. Behind her, a small group of parents had already arrived. I'd quietly put the word out: free riding lessons for special needs children. One by one, they brought their kids. Smiles, laughter, even a few tears. Snowflake, our new miniature horse, was calm and sweet. Mason led the first ride himself, Karen stood stiff in the middle of it, all watching a child laugh while circling on horseback, her face twisted with fury. "This is harassment," she spat. "You're doing this to provoke me." "Nope," I said flatly. "I'm doing this because your arrogance got my son's best friend killed. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for justice." "You'll regret this," she growled. I smiled. "So will your board when they learn what I uncovered." I handed her a second envelope: property maps, notarized statements, footage from the hunters admitting she'd authorized their entrance, and a formal complaint filed with the County Land Commission. She yanked the envelope from my hand and stormed off without another word. That evening, as I watched Mason help a young boy with Down syndrome climb onto Snowflake's back, something in me shifted. Karen had played her game through intimidation and manipulation. I'd played mine through truth. But we weren't finished, not yet. Next stop, the courtroom. And this time, I wasn't just defending my land, I was defending every inch of what she tried to take from my son. Karen's empire began to crumble the moment the county board received my formal complaint. The footage of the hunters admitting she gave them access, the proof of a falsified land survey, the notarized testimony from my licensed surveyor. It was all there, neatly packaged, impossible to ignore. Within a week, the County Land Commission launched a formal investigation into Hillshade Pines HOA. The news spread faster than wildfire. What began as a quiet property dispute had become a public scandal, and Karen, she vanished from her morning HOA patrols. No more barking at kids for sidewalk chalk. No more sending passive-aggressive emails about non-compliant fencing. Rain was breaking apart, and her own board members turned on her to save themselves. I didn't even have to show up to their emergency meeting. She was voted out unanimously, but that wasn't enough. I wanted the record set straight, so I pursued civil action, a lawsuit for trespassing, property damage, emotional distress, and, most importantly, for Mason. Because she hadn't just let hunters onto my land, she let them destroy something irreplaceable. Karen tried to counter with her own attorneys claimed the hunting incident was unintentional, that she had never given express written permission. But we had the audio from the trail cam, clear as day, her voice naming my land and saying it was fine for use. We also had the surveyor she hired who, facing his own license suspension, confessed that Karen had pressured him into redrawing the boundary lines. By the time we reached the courtroom, Karen looked like a ghost of herself, thin, pale, twitchy. Her pearls were gone. Her voice trembled. The judge didn't hesitate. He ruled in my favor. Mason was awarded $250,000 settlement held in trust until his 18th birthday. Karen was ordered to pay $50,000 personally in punitive damages, with a portion going to cover Snowflake's therapy center. But the part that mattered most, the judge required a formal public apology. Karen tried to fight it. She claimed it was humiliating. The judge reminded her what humiliation really looked like for a 10-year-old boy who watched his best friend bleed out in a field. So she stood there, 3 weeks later, in front of a local news camera, hands clasped in front of her like a scolded child. "I deeply regret my actions, and the pain I've caused the whole family." Mason stood next to me, watching quietly. When she looked at him just for a second, he didn't flinch. He didn't smile either. He just nodded. After the broadcast, Mason said nothing, just climbed into the truck beside me and held Snowflake's lead rope a little tighter. That night, we walked out to Pepperjack's grave beneath the cottonwood tree. The wind was soft, the sky streaked with burnt orange. Mason knelt down and placed a photograph, one of him riding Pepperjack, both smiling under the summer sun. "I think he'd like what we built," he said. I nodded. We weren't just healing anymore, we were growing. The therapy center expanded. With help from local families, we built a second stable, added a picnic area, and even hosted weekend riding events. Kids from all over Hillshade and beyond came to ride Snowflake and her new companion, Buttercup. And no one, not a sold-out question, a right to be there. Karen sold her home and moved out of Hillshade 2 months later. Rumor was she tried starting over in another town, but people talk. Her name followed her. As for us, we stayed right where we were, stronger than before, our land protected, our hearts steadied. And every time I watched Mason lead a new rider around the corral, his smile soft but sure, I knew we'd taken back more than just soil. We took back peace.